people log on, but we'll go ahead and get started so we can take advantage of the full hour. So again, welcome to the FYI 2014 webinar series from PALCUS. We're very happy to have you. This is a webinar series we have started in order to share lots of different information and resources with the community. And so we hope you will enjoy today's webinar. Today we're talking about the Ferreira-Mendes Portuguese-American Archives. It will be presented by Sonia Pacheco, who is the librarian archivist there at the archives. So we're very happy to have her. Thank you very much, Sonia. Everybody is in listen-only mode. So if you do have a question, you can type it into the GoToWebinar console that should be appearing on the right side of your screen. And then, of course, if you have additional questions after the webinar, you can send them to us at palcus@palcus.org. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Sonia, and I'm just going to give you controls of the keyboard and mouse, Sonia. So you should have control, and you're ready to go.
Thank you very much. So again, my name is Sonia Pacheco, and I'm the librarian archivist at the Ferreira-Mendes Portuguese-American Archives. This session is a general information session about the archives and what we have here. I am not addressing specific genealogical questions, but we can see how things go. But in the presentation itself, I'm not addressing any genealogy. I've listed both my email and the website for the archives, so I ask and welcome all to check us out. Oh, one slide too far. So why UMass and why Portuguese archive? As some of you may be aware, Massachusetts has a long and well-established pattern of Portuguese immigrant settlements, specifically in the South Coast. There were two immigration movements to the United States from Portugal, one at the latter part of the 19th century, made up predominantly of Azoreans and who came to work in the whaling industry and then moved on to the textile industries. And then starting in the 1960s with the changes that were made to the immigration policy to all of the United States, but also a number of individuals also came due to the Refugee Immigrant Act of 1958, which happened as a result of the volcanic eruption of Caplinge in Fayal. UMass Dartmouth is a leader in the area of Portuguese studies and culture. We have both a bachelor, master's, and PhD degree available in Portuguese. And it was also a matter of the right people at the right place at the right time. We had some faculty members who had been working towards having a Portuguese archive on campus for a number of years. So through some very successful fundraising and these particular faculty members, who at the time was Professor Frank Sousa, who's no longer with us, as well as Professor Gloria de Sá, who's the faculty director of the archives, and Judy Ferrara, who was the archivist here at the Portuguese archives for a number of years before I came on board. So the three of them together were the right people at the right place at the right time. So just very quickly, a timeline of events. In 1996, the Center for Portuguese Studies and Culture is founded. This was a reiteration of several centers that had existed on campus before that were involved with Portuguese studies in all matters of culture related to Portuguese immigration. It led to the creation of the Department of Portuguese, which revitalized the teaching of Portuguese language and culture on campus, and subsequently led to the PhD program. And together with the center, the library begins the process of collecting materials related to Portuguese community. In 2005, we have the lead gift made by Miss Otília Ferreira, whose father, Afonso Gil Mendes Ferreira. The name is inverted because that is how he was commonly known in the community, as Ferreira-Mendes, was a pioneer of Portuguese-American radio in 1933. In 2009, construction is completed on the facilities, and we have a grand opening. So if you do some quick math, it is now 5 years later, and we will actually be celebrating our 5th anniversary. The official celebration is on the 18th, but we will be having a public celebration on October the 9th. So, I don't know if any of our attendees have been to the archives before. If you haven't, what you're seeing on your screen is actually the facade of our entry. We are located in the newly renovated Claire T. Carney Library. The library itself underwent a significant renovation 2 years ago. It houses the Ferreira-Mendes Portuguese-American Archives, houses the largest collection of historical material documenting the experience of Portuguese immigrants and their descendants. Our scope is national. Yes, that is very ambitious. However, Portuguese immigration cannot be told through the story of immigrants in Fall River, or immigrants in New Bedford, or immigrants in San Diego, or even immigrants in Honolulu. Portuguese immigration is only told when all of those immigrants gather together to tell their story individually, and then those individual stories make up the whole of it. So that is why our scope is national. And we have the papers of Portuguese Americans distinguished in politics, business, law, entertainment, the arts, and literature. We also house genealogical records, newspapers, books, recordings, family photographs, scrapbooks, correspondence, pretty much you name it, and we have one of it within our collection. Some of these items are traditionally found in archives, others are not, and I cover that a little bit later on. So the stated mission of the archives is to document the history and culture of the Portuguese in the United States, to generate and support the study and understanding of the experience, history, and culture of Portuguese communities, and to contribute to the preservation, understanding, and teaching of local culture, especially Portuguese ethnic culture. So this is a slide that I normally include when I'm talking to community members who I know for a fact are not familiar with archives, or specifically when I'm doing presentations to students here on campus. I'm just going to cover this very quickly. Those of you who are aware of the differences can say, but of course I knew that. And those of you who may not have known of the differences can just pretend that you did, and now you actually know. So a library is a place that contains published materials. Normally individuals are able to obtain those materials by themselves without staff assistance. In a museum, there are objects, and normally they're only on display, and you only see a small amount of the objects that the museum holds in total. In an archive, we house materials created or received by a person, family, or organization, a public or private individual in the conduct of their affairs, and preserved because of their enduring value, containing the information or as evidence of the functions and responsibilities of their creator. So this is to say that we, in the case of a Portuguese club, we would house their minutes of their meetings, posters that may have had to advertise programs, letter correspondence that they may have had between members and other groups, photographs of events that they hosted. So anything that the club generated while it existed, we would have a copy of that. In the case of a private individual, correspondence that they may have had, newspaper clippings that they may have taken that they considered important to them, photographs, videos that they may have had. So these are the things that we naturally collect, whether as an institution or as an individual. This is a picture of our reading room. This is to give you sort of that 3D experience so that you can actually see that you've seen what the archives looks like. So we've got a reading room. It is open to the general public. You do not have to be affiliated with the university, so you don't have to be a student, alumni, or faculty member. That we are open to the general public. Our hours are Monday to Friday, 9:30 to 5. We do have some flexibility outside of those hours, but we need advance notice, and you would need to get in contact with me directly in order to make sure that that happened. This is a picture of our gallery. And the exhibits on display in the gallery change either through the academic year based upon a topic that is of interest to the university itself, or if we have a special visitor coming and we have materials related to them, we would put them on display, or we pick a topic that is something we want to highlight and we display the materials. This is one of our working areas. This is not open to the public, but just to show you sort of the back room look. And then we have our storage area. Again, not open to the public. This is where we store the stuff. We can most certainly offer tours if requested, but as a general rule, this is not open to the public. So these are some of the questions that I encounter when I do these kinds of presentations. And I'm not going to cover them all, but just to sort of, just very quickly. So what does it mean to be Portuguese? We are not an Azorean archive. We are not a Madeiran archive. We are a Portuguese-American archive. So Portuguese for us is Portugal the country as defined by the United Nations pre-1974, which includes the colonial holdings that Portugal had. Post-1974, it is only Portugal, the European, the country that belongs to the European Union. So we've got mainland Portugal, o continente, as it's informally known, the Azorean archipelago, and the Madeiran archipelago. Then the question is, Azores, Madeira, and Portugal, but where is the U.S.? There are fantastic archives that hold materials related to the United States. We have, we will refer people to those when they have materials that aren't really Portuguese-American. But by the same token, when we get a donation that is of a fantastic materials that are just related to Portugal, we will refer people to Portuguese archive. Here at the Ferreira-Mendes Portuguese-American Archives, our primary concern is documenting the Portuguese-American experience. What happened after individuals left the ship, the airplane, after they settled in the United States, and how they've led their lives as Portuguese-Americans. This leads into, but you don't just have stuff about the Azores. No, we cover all of Portugal. Children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Children very often are like, oh my God, mom and dad just have so much stuff, I'm going to throw it all away. So they come in, they clean the home after the parents have passed on. The grandchildren begin to ask questions. Where did we come from? Where were Vavá and Vovó born? What do we know about them? And for the most part, it begins to be the great-grandchildren who say, oh my goodness, we had so many fantastic things that told the story of Vovó and Vavá when they came to the United States, and we threw it away. We got rid of it. And we got rid of it because it lived in the basement, in the attic, and in our garages. So what I try to do is I try to work with the children from the get-go. I actually try to work with the immigrants themselves, but when that's not possible, I try to work with the children from the get-go to say, what you have tells a phenomenal story. Those pieces of paper that you think are just garbage, those letters that your parents wrote back and forth with their relatives in Portugal, tell a story that is disappearing. It is crucial that we keep that stuff, that we make it available to your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren so they themselves and then their children's children and their relatives and their next-door neighbors know everything that we can possibly tell them about Portuguese Americans. And then the last question is the one that I actually get the most frequently is, but you don't really want that, do you? How about I give you this instead? And what people want to give me are really interesting things. They're plaques. They're the brochures. They're the medals. They're the obvious things that we keep. Very often, the letters, the photographs, the audio recordings are the things that disappear faster, but they're also the things that people don't attribute value to. But they are the things that give us sort of that behind-the-scenes information that is a little bit more difficult to obtain otherwise. So this means that I have a barrel, that I have books, I have actually I have several tablecloths. I've got un jarro de vinho, so a pitcher of wine. I've got some tourist stalls, and I've got hand-woven tapestries. None of these are things that are traditionally kept or collected by archives, but these are things that tell the story of Portuguese immigration. The wine barrel is actually still underneath my desk. I've yet to find a place for it in our storage area. But that barrel, anybody who sees it says, oh, I remember my grandpa making their own wine, or I still make my own wine. You know, I learned from my grandfather, or I learned from my father, or I visited the Azores, and I was so enthralled by everything that I was seeing that I came back and I had to make my own wine like my relatives used to. So while I'm just showing these as an example of things that, while they may not traditionally be kept by most archives, here at the Ferreira-Mendes Portuguese-American Archives, we do have some of these because they tell a very specific and a very intrinsic story about Portuguese-American immigration. It doesn't mean that I actively go out and search for them, but if they come to us as part of a collection, I don't turn them away. So now I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about some of the materials that we have here on site. We've got newspapers. We are the only institution that is proactively collecting and digitizing Portuguese-American newspapers. The number on the screen is actually wrong. At this point, we have 21 newspapers digitized, including those from the East Coast, the West Coast, and Hawaii. At the bottom of the screen is the link to the newspaper specifically, but if you just go to our general webpage, you can then follow the link. Our partners in the digitization have included the J. Freitas Library, located in San Leandro in California. They provided to us the California newspapers. They're a group, they're a library that we're hoping to work with more in the future, as we haven't completed all of California digitization due to cost issues. And then in Hawaii, we worked with the Hawaiian Historical Society, who had the most complete collection of Portuguese Hawaiian newspapers. I'm just going to show you some examples of the kinds of information specific related to genealogy, because that is what people are most intrigued by to use newspapers for. Just some of the kinds of information that you can find in the newspapers, and some of the things you have to watch out for when you're reading them. So the database is in English, but the newspapers are in Portuguese. There are no translation services available, and you must search the newspapers in Portuguese because that's what they were written in. So this is a death notice published in the Diário de Notícias, which was published in New Bedford, from September 20th, 1955. I'm not going to read the whole thing, and I'm not going to translate it for you, just because keeping in mind time, and I've got a few of these examples. But Manuel Paideia, to the I'm going to assume that the participants are not fluent in Portuguese. That way, it just makes it a little bit easier. If you are, I apologize. So Paideia is the verb to fart in the past, conjugated in the past. So as we go through, we've got o Senhor Manuel Paideia, and they've got a question mark because they're unsure whether this was his actual name or an alcunha, a nickname. And when I read this out in public, those who understand Portuguese automatically start laughing because they realize what his alcunha, what his nickname was, and you kind of begin to wonder why he was given the nickname, or potentially the last name of farted. So he was a lavrador, he was a farmer, and he lived in Portsmouth, which is a city in Rhode Island. They go on to list his children, and include his son and then his two daughters who are married, where his funeral is taking place, and where he will be interred, buried. This is a notice, a indagação, a looking for information from Uluzu, which was published in Hawaii from the 20th of June, 1912. And Indigo stories are very interesting because normally they're our father immigrated to the United States. We haven't seen him. Anybody who knows his whereabouts, please send us information. Our son went out to find his fame and fortune in Colorado during the gold rush. We haven't heard from him in 10 years. If anybody knows of his whereabouts, please let us know. There are some which are a little bit more interesting, and I actually have an example of that one. And in this case, this was actually the first time that I had seen a response published to an Indigo song. Again, I'm not going to read it because it is a little bit lengthy, but it's summarized. It's I've recently read that you're looking for my friend by the name of Augusto José Pacheco. As far as I know, he worked with his brother-in-law in West Oakland, and the name of his brother-in-law is such and such, and he was a barber. So, newspaper published in Hawaii, individual who was living out in California, individual who lives in Hawaii who's responding saying, I know this man, this is the information I have. So what I did was I actually tracked back the original Indigo song, and he was actually being searched for by his aunt, who provides her name, her contact, and says, before the great earthquake in San Francisco, my nephew, Augusto José Pacheco, worked for the Grand Hotel. I haven't heard from him since the earthquake. If anybody knows of him, please let me know. So this is actually one of my favorite indagações. It was published in O Progresso Californiense on the 24th of December, 1885. And again, it's quite lengthy, and I apologize, we're just not going to have enough time for me to read them through in Portuguese and then translate them. But it is a husband, Manuel Vieira Pedro, who is looking for his wife, the lady on the right, who has run away with a gentleman on the left. He says when he resides in Provincetown, Massachusetts, which is at the very tip of Cape Cod. When he went out on a whaler, his wife ran away with this gentleman. She took with them their 2 children. He's provided an image, a photograph of these 2 individuals. At this point, I usually laugh because these could be any 2 individuals in 1885, not necessarily just 2 Portuguese immigrants. He wants to know the whereabouts. Specifically, he wants to know the whereabouts of his children. And should he receive successful information, he will give a reward of $20, which is a significant amount of money in 1885, period. But it's also specifically a significant amount of money for an individual who was not a captain on a whaling ship. This was just a regular crewman. So it's the newspapers are interesting for the variety of information they provide, and I've just given you 3 very different examples of kinds of information you can find. So within the archives, we've got a wide variety of information. We have documents on the upper left-hand corner. You see citizenship papers. We've got Portuguese passports, which is actually the document here in the middle. That is actually a Portuguese passport. We have family photographs, and then we also have correspondence. We've got materials related to a variety of individuals. These are just 5 of the people that have donated their paperwork to this or their estates. Alfred Lewis, who was a Portuguese-American writer based out of California. Mary Fonseca, who was a senator out of Massachusetts. Milton Silva, who was a judge and is still alive. We actually celebrated his 90th birthday in the archives in June of 2013. Donald Warren, who was not a Portuguese-American, but has studied Portuguese-American immigration extensively. So we have his research materials, and and specifically his book manuscripts here. And then we have Dennis Resendiz, who is an entrepreneur as well as being an advocate for palliative services. We've got materials related to organizations and community events, bylaws, group photographs. We are always looking for more photographs, particularly photographs that document community events or group photographs like these here. Sadly, by the time we get these photographs, very rarely do we actually know who's in them, but this is something we can certainly work with, and we try to work with the community to try and figure out who was in the photographs. We also have newspapers, magazines, calendars, audio and visual recordings. You see two examples of Portuguese-American local magazines that were published here in New England. We've got an interesting collection of calendars that were given out by local businesses. Very patriotic images, not only Portuguese-American patriotic, but even Portuguese patriotic. And then we've got audio and visual recordings such as Saudade, Nostalgia, which was produced by Professor Fieldman, who's also donated the raw footage to us. So this is, I know that there's a particular interest on Portuguese-American genealogy research. These are just some general things you want to keep in mind. The first thing is you cannot assume that the name you see on an American document is the name that that individual, particularly woman, was given at birth. The custom or that she took that name on in marriage. And the reason for this is that the custom of a woman changing her name is not a Portuguese tradition. It actually did not start becoming popular till the 19th century, and it was only after the 1940s that it became socially obligatory. Notice the word here, socially. It was not legally. The state did not require for you to take on your husband's last name. Society expected you to. In Portugal, a woman assumes her husband's surname. She legally retains her name as evidence on her birth certificate. And this is important because if you've grown up with Maria de Conceição Pereira, you cannot assume that Pereira is her married name, but you also can't assume that Pereira is her birth name because you don't know if she's assumed her marriage name or if she hasn't. So you have to look for both, whether it's, when you're doing your research, you end up having to look as if it is and it isn't. As well, due to the frequency of the first names Maria and João, people are commonly acknowledged by their second name. I just said Maria de Conceição. The female could be known as Conceição, or when she immigrates to the United States, she could just go by Maria, which is where the problem for genealogists go. But within the legally, she could go by Maria, but in every single document you see her as Conceição, or Sue, or Connie, or Mary. So these are things you have to be careful about when you are doing Portuguese-American genealogy, the fluency and the change in the names. You also need to know whether or not the family was known by a nickname. Remember that that newspaper clip I showed you about the Pereira? We don't know if that was his formal last name, if that was his legal last name, or if that was their alcunha. And this is particularly important when you are looking at an American document where the alcunha, the nickname, has now become their legal last name in the United States. But when you go to do the research in Portugal, you can't find evidence of that individual. That could be because the alcunha was not used in Portugal, or the name has been modified. I'm not going to go through all of these, but these are just some examples of how Portuguese last names are shortened. So Francisco could be known as Francisquinho, Chico, Chiquinho, Chiquito, Kiko, Kiku with a K, which would be more common in Brazil, or Cisco. Or you have João Carlos, who is commonly known by Juca, or Tojó, which is Antônio Jorge. The same is true for women's names. Inês, Inezinha, Né, Nené, Nej, Nenoca, Inuecas, Nessa. So these are, again, things you have to keep in mind. So what about these Marias? Maria is traditionally used as part of a two first-name combination, with a second name being derived from any of the following: Catholic devotion, place where Mary appeared, phenoms and natural elements, saints' names, with a proper second name with a masculine second proper name. The convention of naming a female just Maria is something that has only begun to happen in the 21st century. It is only within the last 15 to 20 years that there is the naming of a daughter just the name Maria or just the name João. So when you are doing genealogical research, there is always something else to that Maria. There will always be something else to that Maria. So while in the United States they may have been known just by Maria, when you begin to look at the Portuguese documentation, it will be Maria something else. And that something else is not her last name. It is a two-name first name. That is sometimes a misconception that when individuals are at the very beginning of doing their genealogical research, they'll see something like Maria Fatima, and they may assume that Fatima is her last name. That's not the case. Maria Fatima is a proper first name. I've mentioned that when immigration happened, very often you had name changes. These are just some. This is not an extensive list. These are just some of the names, the more commonly known names that were changed. The change did not happen when individuals got off the ship on the immigration dock. Changes happened in a variety of ways over a period of time. Normally, it was because census takers and city directory takers were American individuals, American citizens, fluent American individuals, fluent English-speaking American individuals who did not speak the language, who more often than not did not speak the language of the people they were talking to at the door. So you have somebody saying that their name is João Lourenço, and the census taker or the census taker here is the word Lawrence. So now, in the census, their name becomes John Lawrence, because the census taker knows that João is the Portuguese equivalent of John, and Lourenço sounds like Lawrence. So, or you may have Rosa, which is the which is the Portuguese word for rose. The census taker knows that's what it is, so they've become Rose. Or you have individuals who are trying to find work, who are not having a lot of luck because of their Portuguese last name due to prejudice. So they know that if they change Machado to Clark, they will have more luck finding work. They did so. I just want to dispel the myth that the change happened through the process of immigration. That was not the case. So what do we see in the future of the Portuguese-American archives? We want to continually add to our collections. We want to continue making our collections available to academic and other researchers in whichever way we can. We promote events and projects that feature our collections or showcase various aspects of Portuguese-American history. We continuously work with educators to develop pedagogical materials that make use of our collections, and we want to build new and grow existing partnerships with other academic institutions, community groups, and individuals. That's all I have for you formally. I am more than, I would love to answer any questions which the audience members may have.
Thank you so much, Sonia. That was really informative, and we definitely have some questions here.
Okay.
Let me pull up the first one. Oh, why can't I open it? Well, there's another question here I can see. So how would it work in terms of somebody comes to the archives, you know, there's the public reading room, but then you have the actual archives. If somebody wanted to see a record or something like that, is that possible? Do they make an appointment? How would someone interact with the archives?
Okay. Appointments are nice, but not necessary. Appointments are strongly suggested for academic researchers because we tend to sit down with them, and their research needs tend to be either more specific or much broader than just a general researcher. So for academic researchers, we do encourage appointments to be made, but we more than gladly welcome anybody who comes into the archives, appointment or no appointment. So with no appointment, you would come in, you'd be greeted. I would normally come out of my office, I would talk to you, I would try and figure out what you're looking for. If what you're looking for is something that we have here, if that's the case, I pull, excuse me, I have to cough. Sorry about that. I pull the materials, I pull the collection. Sometimes it'll be the entire collection, sometimes it'll be parts of the collection depending on what you're looking for. You are free to browse on site. Materials cannot leave our reading room. And then depending on what the item is, you can either make a copy of it yourself. Photographs are definitely allowed within our facilities. We can make photocopies for you if you have a portable scanner. If you talk with us, we can make arrangements for that. Or if there's too many items that need to be duplicated, or if the item is oversized, you would make arrangements with me, and I would provide you with copies of the materials afterwards.
Great. And sort of a follow-up question to that is, will the collection be available online for people to search? You have the newspapers available online. You showed that, but what about some of the other documentation?
Yeah, it is unrealistic to expect that we will be able to provide all of our collections, and we have multiple collections. At this point, I think we've got 30 to 40 collections within the Portuguese archives alone. It is unrealistic to expect that we will be able to digitize every single item that we have on site and make it available online. What we hope to be able to do in the future is do some targeted digitization, and one of the things we have begun to work on is some of our photographs. Myself, the archivist, the academic director, and my coworker, Judy Ferrar, in consultation between the three of us, we decide what we think might be the more appropriate items to digitize, and we will make those available online. It's unrealistic to expect everything to be digitized for cost, but also not everything we have is appropriate to be digitized. Everything we have is a fantastic research resource, but not necessarily something that we want to expand the time and funds to make available online.
And what about the new collection, or your newest collection? Is that something that's already digital?
Are they specifically talking about the microfilm?
That could be, yes.
Yes? Okay.
Yes.
The microfilm, it's actually not our newest collection, it's the newest collection we've made public. That microfilm was donated to us by Family Search Library, and they are copies of microfilm that they had done, I believe, in the 80s and the 90s. So we have a copy of those microfilms. They can only be consulted online. The government of the Azores has been digitizing the same books that were microfilmed in the 80s and the 90s and has been making available online that same information. So we will not be making that information available online, but it's already being made available by the government of the Azores through their Centro de Conhecimento.
Okay, and maybe we could provide that email address or that website address as a follow-up.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
I'm just going to follow that up with something to keep in mind is that much like we don't provide translation services to the microfilm for individuals who come to the library to use that microfilm, and it has already happened, neither does the government of the Azores. The website is in Portuguese. There is no English version available, and the records are also in Portuguese with no translation services available. So if you're doing family genealogy and you don't read a little bit of Portuguese, and you're already at the part where you're searching your Azorean ancestors, you're going to have a little bit of a difficulty.
Okay, so maybe secure the services of a translator or somebody who does paid genealogy projects.
Absolutely.
Okay. We have another question here. Would you be able to give more information on the numerical notes on the last name conversion slide? Is there something else we could reference?
Yes. Okay, I can't go back to that slide. I actually took that particular information. Thank you. Oh, I don't know if I did that myself, but then I don't have the guide with me in front of me, but what it is this was created by somebody who was doing research on the Machado disease, and I believe, just off the top of my head, number 6 are translations, number 4 and 6 are translations, 10 are misspellings. But if the whomever asked the question, if you follow up with me, I can actually give you the citation to this chart.
Okay, great. Another question: do you carry ship passenger lists?
No, we do not. When I talked about how there are fantastic archives doing sort of holding American records, that's one of the cases. Passenger lists are held by the National Archives, and depending, you do not have to go to Washington. I'll put that out there. The National Archives have individual state locations in all of the states. So in Massachusetts, they're actually located in Boston. So at the National Archives, you would be able to find all of the passenger lists for that state.
Okay. If somebody does have some family documentation, heirlooms, or whatnot, as you mentioned, things they may be considering throwing away, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you and to get the items to you?
We'll start by an email or phone call. And then we can go from there. Depending on what the items are and how many items there are and where they are in the United States, we will make arrangements to get the materials here.
Okay. And are there volunteer opportunities at the archives to help with, digitization or organization, anything like that?
Yeah. At this point in time, we don't have volunteer opportunities. Because we're located at the university, our first priority has to be to give student work. So particularly during the academic year, so we're coming into the new academic year, the fall semester, so I'm actually in the thick of hiring student workers. Something we can consider for the summer, but unfortunately during the academic year our priority has to be student workers.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. So I don't have any other questions at this time, but as we mentioned, if you do have questions after this webinar, you think of something, you can contact Sonia directly, or you can contact us at palcus@palcus.org. This webinar will be archived in a couple of different formats. The actual recording will be made available on YouTube as well as our website, and then a PDF of all presentations are posted both to our website and to our Facebook page. So if you wanted to just download the PowerPoint and look at the PowerPoint, that will be made available for you as well. And we hope that you will consider these webinars as a resource to share with family and friends. And we are always looking for new topics. Our goal, the goal of these PALCUS webinars, is to really share lots of different information and resources with the community. So if you have an idea, or you belong to an organization that you would like to share with the broader community, please let us know, and we'd be happy to do a webinar on that topic. Oops, I'm going up instead of down. And with that, I will thank you all for attending again. Obrigado. And thank you again, Sonia, very much for your time. This is really informative, and I hope we can do some other webinars in the future on more topics for the archive.
Absolutely, and should any of the participants have any questions, please not hesitate to contact me.
Excellent. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.